Okay, good afternoon everyone. I thought I'd go no mic. If you can't hear me, please fire up and I can talk into the machine. I thought today, actually I came back and revisited what I suggested I talk about a few months ago and thought it'd be interesting to look at some practical lessons, but I thought I was a bit more curious to talk about the underbelly of design thinking. And I know it's really popular at the moment, but it's potentially quite a difficult thing to bring into your business, and I thought today if we look at a few case studies, I'll try to give you some practical hints and tips for applying design thinking, but also just explore some of the times it goes really wrong in business, because I feel they're greater lessons in those moments than a puff piece on the benefits of design thinking for you. So practical lessons. Firstly, I'm sure most people are familiar with design thinking, but it's helpful to spend a moment looking at it. Design thinking is a process that can be applied, and it does become thinking at its zenith, but it's also a very practical, experiential activity that generally follows these steps of empathy, starting first with the audience and understanding latent needs, defining a problem from the point of view of a user, ideation or brainstorming, coming up with creative concepts, prototyping, expressing a concept in a way that a user might interact with it, and then very fast iterative testing, where we're trying to fail early, fail often, to discover the right thing to do. In its best sense, you do this very rapidly and very, very quickly, although it's very hard to do that sometimes when you begin on the design thinking journey. Today I'm going to focus on these steps and sort of one more that I think actually comes before you begin the projects. That's really important for you. So what are the benefits of design thinking? It's highly experiential, and you tend to just jump straight into a problem space. So what I normally will see is teams that are endlessly having recurrent meetings discussing what they might do in a scenario, rather than let's just find out if the scenario is even real or not, and jumping straight in and having a go. And it's really that bias to action is what excites teams when we get going. We routinely hear that if a team does a design sprint with us for 3 or 4 days, they achieve 6 months worth of work in that day. It's quite hard on the team. When they go back to the business, they're normally exhausted. It's quite hard to deliver it as well, and I think that's something very important when you begin on this design journey, is creating space for your facilitators to recover and make sense of things, and being able to give a great experience for the teams they're leading as well. So let's go going here. The first step in design thinking is planning, and this is always overlooked when you see the design sprints and these ideas, and I think it's really, really important that you invest time to plan up front and make sense of what you're about to take or lead a team into. And here, project selection is critical when you're getting started, and it's imperative that you avoid project anxiety early on. So this is a genuine experience here. This is Akshay from my team, working with Mark from Henry, a fantastic client to work with, very curious to explore design thinking, and they've picked out a political hot potato project to work on. And it's exciting at first, but very quickly the team runs into sludge and they can't move because they don't have permission to be working in the space they're exploring. And what we find is you need to really invest time up front to ensure that this team has permission to be working and designing where they're playing. And it might sound obvious, but so often it just doesn't happen. And extend, what you really want to do is experiment where you have permission to fail, and look for opportunities where there's high customer proximity when you're beginning. So what does that mean? If you're going to begin a design sprint and maybe it's looking at the remuneration packages within your business, that would be a terrible project to begin with, because there's going to be so much anxiety around the outcome that teams are unlikely to be creative or engage fully in the process. You'll find people trying to protect themselves in the design sprint or design cycle, which is generally a very vulnerable process anyway. So if the teams don't feel safe in working on what they're charged to do, it won't go very well at all. And by customer proximity, it's very good when you can work quite fluidly with a customer. So you might have seen videos of teams designing a Nordstrom rack where they actually set up the sprint inside the store. And these are the environments you're looking for early on, because you get incredible empathy into the project. You can't sort of dine away on your own perspective for too long, because there's always that customer around the corner. This is a project we did at Auckland Zoo earlier this year, and this is actually a prototype in action with Gary from the zoo, testing a concierge service that looks after younger children to give the parents a 20-minute break to have a coffee and really sort their own shit out before the kid destroys them. And what's so cool here is it's about to fail spectacularly. And this little girl here is asked by her father, would you like to go with Gary and have a special zoo tour? and she just erupts into tears and starts screaming, no way, I want to leave you. Which is what we're trying to do, is get these fails out of the way very, very quickly before something like this gets the excitement of a digital team, and next thing an app's been coded and deployed and no one actually wanted this in the first place. For the sake of being an imaginative person and spending an afternoon just interacting with customers. So, areas like train stations or railways or places where you can very quickly get to people are good places to start design thinking. I'm sorry, I just have to keep moving on, I won't get through. So what you need to do when you're starting is scale challenges appropriately. Project selection is absolutely critical. You want to begin working on projects where you don't really care about the outcome either way. And then there's no anxiety, and the team's free to be creative and explore interesting spaces and maybe really surprise teams with what they come back. If there's anxiety associated with the design investment, either the funding of a team to do this or the potential outcome, do not start there. It'll end in tears, and you'll upset people to the point where they'll probably want to leave the business, versus coming up with a graduated scale of projects and allowing team time and space to explore low anxiety problems early on, and then maybe graduating them into more important projects over time. And really, you need to ask yourself, what is the acceptance threshold for failure here? If we can't tolerate failure with this project, I wouldn't begin there. But if you can really be, a level of ambivalence as to what happens, then it's a great place to start. So it might be something more humble, like redesigning a meeting experience, or something where you're not really too concerned about the outcome, and the team can really invest themselves in the process and learning new skills and how these skills might work inside your business. So empathy, and I thought we'll just talk through each stage of the cycle. Where does empathy go wrong? So what you really need to do is avoid empathy work that's devoid of empathy, and what I typically see are these sorts of things, which is like a dashboard for a customer, or a customer persona. And this one's particularly lame, and there's not even a drawing of a person here, but you're seeing sliders of how they behave, and it's really just a complete work of fiction, and at best it's a mirror image of the people who are in the room who designed this persona. What you must do is keep real people front and centre with this work, and we're quite simply wired to care. Our brain is wired to care. When I see a picture of someone, when I see a dashboard of somebody, I don't really care. It's probably about as good as showing a PowerPoint show to you now. It's very hard to engage with it in any emotional, deep way. What we want to do instead is visit the customer in their world, see what they're doing and not doing with your products and services, and be there in that real moment. So this is a company called Paymark who run the EFTPOS networks for New Zealand. They're talking to DJ Cardinal in Customer Central in Ponsonby, and seeing how he's using the tools and what transactions he's trying to do, and how is he going about doing it. And in this moment, the team will be back within an hour, and they talk about real conversations and real stories and real problems that are happening, and not their perspective of the world. And this is challenging for a company like Paymark, because it's riddled with deep data scientists and data nerds, self-declared data nerds who make the assumption that everybody out there has the same thirst for data that they do. And across a series of sprints of us here, they're getting burnt and failing quite quickly, and realising no, people don't really care for the world the way they do in terms of data and analytics. And they're getting quite bold feedback instead about what needs to happen. So it tends to calibrate you to the truth very quickly. I find genuine customer empathy will take a lot of opportunities off the table. The customer here has been presented 10 different metrics on their business, and to myself, I only really care about one. The rest of these 9 things you spend your time on are vanity metrics to me. They don't really change my world in any meaningful way. So this company has suddenly taken 90% of the opportunity off the table, and is able to focus on that one minimum desirable product that a customer is going to fall in love with and want to buy from them. So always start with what we call an outside-in approach. Don't begin with an inside-out view of the world. So what that means is always begin with the customer's point of view, and it might not reconcile with your own point of view as a business. But the neat thing is, when you get those tensions, there's a lot of energy to be creative and come up with novel solutions. Internally focused projects may be perceivably easier to get off the ground. Like, let's look at our onboarding experience as one that we quite often hear. Always end in failure generally, because of this protectionism of the team. Like, we don't really want to change that, because that's going to impact my job longer term. And a self-preservation mechanism kicks in, which always seems to undermine design sprints. At worst, you'll get a very myopic view of the world where suddenly you're hearing routinely suggested ideas starting to come out again, and then you get into a lot of personal arguments. Whereas a customer voice is neutral, it's not me versus you, it's another perspective outside the room that's very real, it's funding our business, and we need to align around this instead. Define is one of the hardest pieces of design thinking. Design thinking is a process that diverges and converges over time, and when you've done a lot of research, you've got a lot of interesting intelligence from your customers. How the hell do you line up on a singular problem? Which is what you really need to be doing, and for a number of reasons. What's critical if you're seeing a team beginning design thinking is watching out for loosely defined projects and problem spaces. And what it can do is lead to designing for self again. And this one down here is how might we allow choice, which is a terrible problem statement. I can wrap it up because I see it's my handwriting on it, but it's just so vague and nebulous, it doesn't really help anybody at all. Instead, it's much better if that's written in the point of view of the customer and is far more precise. What they'll let you do is understand when it's working versus when our designs are failing. Whereas in a moment like this, how might we allow choice? It's just all bets are on all the time. It's far too vague, and it's not really going to help the team in any purposeful way. So what we like to do is fail fast, fail early, and fail often. And this can only happen when you have a clearly defined problem. Has this app helped this woman find her bus stop? Yes or no? And at this moment, no, it hasn't. She's been confused and overwhelmed. That prototype has failed. Let's go back and rebuild it again. Versus, well, I think it's helped her in this moment do a little bit of this, so we think this prototype's really good and we're going to keep going with this as a business. It just doesn't give you the benefits that you require. You're really trying to almost kill these ideas off as quickly as you can, and it's one of the paradoxical things with design thinking. You're trying to generate many ideas and kill them off almost as quickly. So define the problem precisely. It feels unnatural to be so specific early on. However, the more specific you are, the greater the success you'll have with your designs. It will take your teams time to learn the confidence to do this, to really have a singular point of view and put that out there. So we believe the problem is this, and we're now going to experiment to either prove it or disprove our hypothesis. And always within these problem statements, you want to understand the impact of the end user. You know, how might we help a person change the way they typically do this within this moment with our product or service. So you're really trying to get down to the nub of things. Ideation is, I personally can't stand it. It's a critical part of design thinking, but I feel it's just all wrong generally. Teams often, you know, when you see the posts that we're doing design thinking, it's not really. This at best here is a brainstorm we've run earlier in the year, and it's just lame. There's very low volume of ideas. It's very low intensity experience. And what we really want to do is stop this from unfolding generally. This is not what you really want happening in your business. When teams are really well set up for ideation and brainstorming, you might get 300 ideas out of them in 10 minutes. But I found these states very, very rare, and they seldom happen in New Zealand. I've had this feedback given to me from American people I've worked with who said, you know, by comparison, American brainstorming is just through the roof and wild. You know, they are going to put people on the planet of Mars and do these things. However, there's a very low uptake on ideas in the States beyond ideation, which I couldn't really believe. I said, well, no, it's true. You're just worshipping our biggest companies, but mostly these things don't happen. Whereas you Kiwis take the very worst idea and commercialise it. So I think we've got, we need to get better at it, but there are better ways to go about ideation from what I've seen. And I find even if you challenge a New Zealand audience like that, the brainstorming is dynamic for about 120 seconds, and then it very quickly peters out again. And maybe it's our inbuilt pragmatism that limits the wild ideas from happening. So what can you do instead? Well, generally you want to see something a little bit more akin to this. There's a lot of photographs of the user studies we've done. This is actually looking at the Auckland Zoo customer experience map. The images are all drawn, and at this point they're becoming metaphors more than post-it notes or bullet-pointed ideas that can convey many, many things. It's highly visual and creative. Peter here is stoked on it, and he can't be stopped. There's a lot of energy and enthusiasm in the room, which has come because we started outside in and spent, I think, 8.5 days shadowing people through their entire zoo experience before, during and after, and getting a lot of stimulation ideas about how we might be improving things. So what can we do more practically when we go back to our work? faces. Let's consider the use of solitary ideation. And there's exercises out there you can download, things called Crazy Eights, and activities that allow people individual time to come up with their own ideas. And what I find is it leads to a far more considered level of ideation and brainstorming, where people have space to really develop their thoughts out. And it's in this moment you're not finding the mechanics of a large brainstorming session with people coming up and down and putting ideas up, and I find a lot of people just shrink to the back of those moments and they don't really contribute fully. Where in this moment everyone's sitting there drawing 8 ideas across 8 minutes, and then their methods and tools to share those back, which is the important part, is getting collusion and collaboration with ideas. But it just feels a little bit, again, of a paradox that a good brainstorming session is a silent one done on your own, but I found this to produce the biggest dividends with teams when you get going. And within an hour, you can have 40 or 50 really, really cool ideas, and the ability of someone to express those and talk you through them as a team. So again, Insight 4, create space to think, or I call it solitary ideation. It allows people more time, more considered time to think. It's still a very time pressure exercise to draw 8 completely different things in 8 minutes, but you get much better quality output, and it's much more accessible as a team. This is something that you can probably do within a 1-hour meeting, set it up, get some great ideas from people, have some feedback and share, and then be gone, versus an ideation I find takes 4 to 5 beers and a pretty happy team, and then people start to ease up a bit and it gets going. Prototyping for me is the best part of design thinking. It's also an area that loses people early on, and some clues I'd give is avoid concepts and scale diagrams. So oftentimes when people are beginning a design thinking experience and out come the Lego bricks, that's just horror. It's about time to fold. What type of experience does this create? So here's a little mock scale we built on the Canterbury Tech Summit in 2018, and this is where the Lego men come in here and then they do this. It's just not going to really engage a user in any meaningful way and give you any meaningful data. I mean, I shouldn't be harder. I guess it's neat that you're being creative and you're trying to conceptualize an idea, but generally, you don't want to be doing this. You'd be better off creating experiences and moments that someone can interact with. Instead, you're going to get far more data back. So we can create interactive experiences where you can learn, fail, and rapidly evolve process. So this is, again, Paymark. We ran 7 sprints with them across a sort of a 6-month window. We were lucky to have 2 GMs involved with the project full time, and we've repeated the same topic 4 times over. There's been some pretty horrific fails along the way. One was a 5-day sprint that ended in 2 days. We said, no, we're not going any further. I've heard enough customer feedback to now know this is a bad idea and we shouldn't explore this anymore. Very tough as a facilitator, like, well, I think we should keep going here. He said, no, I don't. I think we should go to the pub. And then got a little bit better. But mostly just this feeling of, I don't know, maybe there's something behind here. He said, well, the flip side is you just saved us $1 million, because that's money we had allocated to this project that I'm now super confident just had no life in it at all. What's so neat here is we've built paper prototypes. And I thought it was curious you seeing how familiar it is to the final product on the market, which is Paymark Insights. And it's really a B2B business moving to a B2C business and understanding how it can create deep customer utility with the existing data that it has at the moment. And I'm not sure if the product's full blown, but what they're able to do now is show you share of wallet spend to a merchant. So if I go and buy a coffee, they can apply machine learning to their database and understand that that card belongs to Simon Holbrook. And I've just spent $5 at this cafe, and I'm spending $32 a day at cafes, and that merchant has that information at the moment. And then they can choose to maybe offer me a free coffee and try and win more of my business, or elevate their service offering in some way. But I think it's so cool seeing that this took 2 or 3 days to be able to get a very simple view of the world. A user was able to interact with that and get very, very pointed feedback. We haven't even gone into a digital version of that prototype at this point, but it's come out remarkably familiar at the end of quite an intensive build process. So what we like to term is fake it till you make it. And this is a good thing to think about with a prototype. How can we make something whereby a customer will believe this has actually happened and is really in the market? And I think you'll be quite shocked at what people will accept as real when you go and test. Oftentimes we find people are too scared to go out there with a crazy idea and then almost stunned when a stranger will just pick it up and start going through it and giving really candid feedback. What you need to think about is how do people discover and use your products and services and apps? What moment does someone intuitively think to go and use your service? And you want to be there in that moment for testing and then understand, well, is this idea even relevant? And too oftentimes we find ideas are invented in a petri dish world where it makes perfect sense in isolation, but when that product's deployed, it just doesn't work. There's just not this natural moment where you save me time, or you're making my life easier, or you save me money naturally, so I'm going to go and use your product or service. And what we want to do is emulate that in some way while we're prototyping in these design cycles. And again, always in low fidelity. You can build anything and prototype anything if you're imaginative enough. And then finally, testing. So what we want to do here is click on Roger, who's our Chief Technology Officer, always a good sport. We're doing a sprint. But what's not very cool here is this is a workshop testing environment. This is something we've run, I think it might be Vodafone actually, a few months ago. But what you need to avoid is when you're bringing testers into this false workshop world, or even worse still, you've got a set of personas and we're now going to make a fundamental decision based on what a persona is telling us. These are very, very dangerous ways to go about it. You're suddenly getting predictable feedback. Like, oh, I know what this persona is going to do. It's going to do whatever I want it to do to get my design finished here. Versus a user who's just going to come in and tell you, well, actually, that's quite a bad idea. I don't really like that. I don't think I'd ever use this. Thank you. Tell me what you'd use instead. And then that way you can rebuild and change and pivot and do this very, very quickly. If you find you need to make a decision and arguments are unfolding, or people are getting hung up on semantics and nomenclature, I guarantee you'll have not enough empathy in the process, and you're instead falling back to an inside-out view of the world, getting caught up in arguments and internal politics and belief structures, and normally the alpha male in the room wins out, and it's just generally a failure, whereas a customer just keeps life very, very simple. So run real-world experiments in real time. Go out there with your idea and drop it into the closest indicator for its real scenario that you can, and learn to design with your customer in the right context. So this is Paymark exploring a new payment technology that's contactless. It's using facial recognition. How the hell do we test this? So we've made a really nasty phone call box, stolen some bizarre EFTPOS tool that the world never saw to just make it look authentic. As people have come in, we've asked them to tap their phone and say that they'd like to pay with Paymark today. What they didn't know is we put a credit card down and paid for every transaction that came through the cafe. But as people went up and said, I'd like to pay with Paymark, the concierge said, well, thank you, that's done. And this person, what? You've paid for it already. How have I done that? Well, when you touch your phone outside, we got your details and it's all been paid automatically. I don't think I like that. Well, tell me why. And what we find is, it's funny, but the customers are not visionaries. And in fact, it's not too often you meet a genuine visionary in the business. So when you're presenting a future-based idea to a customer, how can they give you feedback on that? Oh, that's a cool idea. And off they go. Versus if you actually believe it's just happened, you can all of a sudden get very, very pointed feedback and discover all the things you didn't know about a product or service. And then here we found some really interesting patterns on this project. We found for a baby boomer, it was a delightful experience. They just had giant phablet phones, don't really understand how the technology is working, but it just delights me every day in new ways, and this is a natural extension of that. Of course, this is happening. And we found millennials just despising it altogether, have enough awareness of what might be happening with the data and just don't want a bar of this world, yet still demanding an experience that could probably only happen by way of knowing that person and having access to their data. So they're learning very interesting things as in that moment. As you showed, I don't think she was super impressed by it until we told her that coffee was on Paymark, and then we were able to go into a whole lot more. So I think we're good for time. 1 minute left. Okay, perfect. So experiment in the real world. The best design lab already exists. It's your marketplace. Don't worry about getting a design room set up and war rooms. Just get out there and get going. And be bold and bring the backstage experimentation into the front line. Your customers won't only forgive you, they'll love you for doing it because they'll feel a part of your service offering, and I think you'll be amazed at what they're prepared to do. So So I think, you know, the pitfalls here, starting out with mission critical projects in states of anxiety, please don't do that. Scale challenges with your team and build confidence over time. This is a confidence game, and anything you do as leaders or as colleagues that undermines the confidence of a design team will be at the peril of the business. You know, you want these people to think they are bulletproof. Template empathy. You know, don't use persona charts and things with big decisions. Just go talk to your customer. It's actually a lot easier. It's much more enjoyable, and it'll give you a lot more inspiration. So work outside and always start with real people. Look out for loosely defined projects and problem spaces. You know, just ask your design team, what problem are you solving? And if they can't answer that, be very, very nervous, or offer them some help to define the problem a little bit better. You know, be very clearly defined on the problems, and then you'll know when you're either winning or failing with your solutions and trying to answer them. Lackluster brainstorming experiences. You know, try solitary ideation or exercises that allows an individual to create a storyboard or a deeper expression of their idea. You'll get much better quality ideas, and it'll also let introverts out to play and stop it becoming an extrovert-dominated experience with maybe your greatest thinkers shutting down and not really contributing very much. Avoid theoretical and unengaging prototypes, because they suck. And instead, fake it till you make it. You know, just think, what type of experience model do you be able to create around this? Or what's the most pressing variable that we'd like to solve and understand? And then come up with a way to test that. And again, workshop testing with users with personas. Don't do that. Experiment in the real world. You know, take your concept out to the person who might actually use it, and get that feedback as fast as you can. If you're taking an overnight gap between a concept and feedback, you're in big trouble. You'll start to get wed to your solution. You almost want to be in real time. You know, building something and 30 minutes later out there testing it again, which is why I suggest look for those high customer proximity environments where it's easy to get to people and to get feedback. And that's all. Thank you very much.
So the room's letting you off pretty lightly. I've only got 3 questions, unless you want to keep adding to the Slido, and I'll read them out. Okay. Go to the cynical room. Just so. Okay. So, who is using design thinking in New Zealand, and is it a difference anymore?
Well, I think if you can, who's using it? Everyone, but quite a large company of banks, telcos, healthcare providers, insurance companies, and what you've seen is large-scale organisations that have been disrupted and can afford to fund headcount and people to work on these projects full-time. What's the cynical part of it? Does it work? It's a pathway to creating a point of difference, but I wouldn't assume that if you do this once, we're differentiated. It's a way of being that can lead there, but I think to truly differentiate, you have to look at very hard answers there. But it's certainly a means to do that. Or what's the default? Let's just do it the way we're always doing it. It's not going to get there, I guarantee you.
Another interesting question. How far can you go when lying to users to test a prototype?
Really, really far, yeah. I mean, you're not lying. It's almost like a pop-up impromptu theatre you're running, and they're the star of the show without realising. You do have to be very mindful. You know, there's situations where it's not appropriate and you shouldn't engage. But more often than not, I find people are simply delighted to be involved with it. Every time we work, there's a fear to go talk to the customer initially, and then there's a fear again to go and prototype with them. The first revelation is everyone wanted to talk to us, yeah. And the second is a company they're even more prepared to talk with these ideas. And we'll say, oh, it's a pretty horrific thing, just maybe that really not compassion. But that's what it's all about.
How many post-it notes do you use every year in these sessions? Do you think?
$800 worth for a stroke normally on 3
Wow.
post-it notes. The big flip sheets, I think $80 or $90 a pad. Treat those with caution. I don't like post-it notes, but they're a great way to make all ideas equal and sort of democratise them really. You don't know who wrote what, where it came from.
So if you don't have much time for a project, you can't go through all your steps. What step would you cut out?
Maybe ideation, and go straight into building a solution if you can. But without empathy, it doesn't work. You need to understand people, and without prototyping testing, why bother? You're just going to fall in love with your own idea and go. But I think you can. I sometimes wonder, is there a quicker way to get to this moment where I'm about to make something and show it to a customer? Because that's where all the exciting things happen.
How do you solve the problem of not having access to users?
I couldn't imagine where that might happen, but I guess you could run, if it was a digital experience, you might divert every 1,000 person lands on a page to another experience, do some sort of regression testing, or I don't think there is. I think a lack of imagination might be showing that. When you're testing, you just want an objective opinion. That doesn't really matter where that comes from. I think I was about to leave.
Yes, everybody's leave. So thank you very much.
Thank you.